The woman in the dust. The twin suns of Alaris 9 burned hot above the empty plains. Spreading their golden light over miles of cracked red soil, a lone truck rolled across the dirt road, its old engine humming like a tired beast, dust clouds rising behind it. Inside sat a human rancher named Eli Ward, a man of few words and quiet habits. He had lived on this distant frontier world for years, raising tough desert cattle and avoiding the chaos of the Galactic core. To him, peace was the sound of wind through wire fences and the low hum of his farm machines. But that peace broke today. Ahead on the dusty road, he saw something strange. At first, it looked like a pile of wreckage half buried in the sand. But as he slowed his truck, the shapes began to move. Eli frowned. Pulling the brakes and stepping out, his boots sinking slightly into the soft red dust. The air was dry and the heat shimmered. But what he saw made him forget the temperature. It was a woman, or something close to one. Her skin had a faint silver tone. Her hair shimmered like strands of pale metal. She clutched two small children close to her chest, and another older child knelt beside her. Coughing weakly, they were not human, that much was clear. But they were alive. Afraid and lost, Eli felt something twist in his chest. The kind of feeling a man gets when he sees someone who's already suffered too much. He stepped closer, raising his hand slowly so he wouldn't frighten them. "You hurt?" he asked, his voice deep and steady. The woman looked up, her large violet eyes reflecting the sunlight like glass. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but the words came out broken. Her translator implant sparked and flickered. Finally managing, "Please, help. My children." Eli glanced around. There was no sign of a vehicle. No ship. Nothing but sand and sky. He knew the closest settlement was 30 miles away, and a storm was rolling in from the west. He didn't think, he just acted. "Get in my truck," he said, his tone firm but calm. The woman blinked, confused. As if she didn't understand, he repeated louder, "Get in. Now," and pointed toward the old truck. The eldest child hesitated, his strange blue eyes wary. But when Eli opened the truck door and waved them in, the decision was made. The alien mother gathered her little ones and followed. Moving slowly, limping as if her legs could barely hold her, Eli helped lift the smallest child, wrapping his coat around the boy. The child was burning up, feverish, weak, dehydrated. Eli didn't know what kind of species they were, but he knew suffering when he saw it. He climbed back into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. The truck roared to life again, wheels kicking up a storm of dust as he turned toward his ranch. For a while, no one spoke. Only the soft breathing of the children and the hum of the engine filled the silence. Eli's mind raced. He had seen aliens before, traders, miners, even smugglers, but never ones like this. Never so fragile, their clothes were torn and burned. Like they had escaped a crash or an attack. Finally, he asked, "What happened?" The woman's head lowered, her voice trembling. "Pirates. We fled from the trade route. They took everything. Our ship fell. I thought no one would find us." Eli's jaw tightened. Pirates had been raiding outer colonies for months, taking whatever they could find. Tech, slaves, supplies, and the government didn't care. Not about backwater worlds like Alaris 9. He muttered under his breath, "Not on my land." They don't. When they reached the ranch, Eli parked near his old barn. He opened the door and helped the woman out. The children clung to her legs, staring at the wide-open plains like they were another world. Inside the barn, Eli laid out blankets and poured water from his canteen. The alien mother bowed her head slightly, her eyes glistening. "You help strangers," she whispered. Her translator humming softly, Eli shrugged. "Ain't about strangers," he said. "It's about what's right." The smallest child reached for Eli's hat, giggling faintly, and for the first time, a small smile broke across the rancher's weathered face. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The storm was coming, but the barn would hold still. Eli knew this was no simple rescue. There was something about that woman, the way she carried herself, the strange patterns on her cloak, the look in her eyes, that told him she wasn't just a refugee. She was someone important, someone being hunted. And as lightning cracked across the red sky, Eli realized the quiet life he once knew was over. The galaxy had found his doorstep, and it had brought trouble with it. The storm and the secret. The wind screamed outside the ranch, beating against the walls like a living thing. Dust and lightning danced together across the plains, while inside the barn, the flickering lantern light painted warm colors over worried faces. Eli threw another piece of wood into the old furnace, watching as the flames came alive again. The alien children huddled together near the heat, their strange eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The mother sat nearby, silent but alert, her silver skin glistening with sweat and exhaustion. Eli poured her a cup of water, his rough hand steady but his thoughts restless. He had brought strangers into his home before, workers, traders, refugees, but never like this. There was something different about this woman. She carried herself with quiet strength even in weakness. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "My name is Kalara." Eli nodded, sitting across from her. "Eli Ward," he replied simply. The woman's eyes met his, and for a moment there was silence. Not the silence of fear, but the kind that comes before truth. Kalara glanced toward her children, then whispered, "You shouldn't have stopped for us." Eli frowned. "Why's that?" "Because they'll come," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "They never leave loose ends." Outside, the thunder rolled closer, shaking the barn doors. Eli leaned back, crossing his arms. "You mean the pirates?" Kalara shook her head slowly. "No, worse." Her translator flickered, as if hesitating on the right words. They were not pirates, they were hunters. Sent by the Dominion. Eli's jaw tightened again. The Dominion, he'd heard the name before. The massive alien empire that claimed half the galaxy. They didn't deal with simple colonists. They ruled from orbit, crushing worlds under bureaucracy and power. "What would the Dominion want with you?" he asked. Kalara hesitated, her hand resting on the smallest child's head. "I was part of them," she said softly. "Before they decided I was a problem." Eli didn't push further, but the tension in the air grew heavy. The storm outside howled louder, rain beginning to fall in sheets. He stood, moving to seal the barn door, his mind racing through what he'd just heard. If the Dominion really wanted her, they wouldn't stop until they found her, and now, his ranch was part of their trail. When he returned, Kalara was looking at an old hollow screen he'd hung on the wall. The device flickered with static, showing a faint symbol, one Eli didn't recognize. Kalara touched the symbol gently, her fingers trembling. "That's their mark," she said. "They leave it when they hunt someone." Eli narrowed his eyes. "You saying they marked me now?" She looked up at him with sorrowful eyes. "Yes," he gave a dry, humorless chuckle. "Figures." Then he walked to his tool bench, pulling out an old blaster rifle and setting it beside the furnace. Kalara's eyes widened slightly. "You plan to fight them?" Eli shrugged. "Don't plan on dying easy." The children watched him quietly, one of them tugging on Kalara's sleeve, whispering something in their native tongue. Kalara smiled weakly. "They ask if you are a soldier." Eli shook his head. "Nah," he said. "Just a man with a stubborn streak." Hours passed, and the storm finally began to fade. The plains outside shimmered under the twin moons, and the scent of wet dust filled the air. Kalara and her children had fallen asleep. Wrapped in old blankets, Eli sat by the furnace, his eyes half closed but his thoughts sharp. He knew his life had changed forever the moment he stopped that truck. In the dim glow, something on Kalara's wrist caught his attention. A faint light pulsed under her skin, a mark shaped like a small star. Surrounded by circular lines, he leaned closer, whispering to himself, "What in the stars are you, lady?" Before he could think more, a small sensor on his desk began to beep, a proximity alarm he'd set years ago. He froze, his instincts kicking in. Someone or something was approaching the ranch. Eli stood slowly, grabbing his rifle and moving toward the door. He glanced back once, seeing Kalara stir slightly in her sleep. "Stay asleep," he muttered under his breath. No sense scaring the kids yet. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the night was alive with light, far in the distance. 3 glowing orbs floated above the horizon. Ships, moving slow, searching. The Dominion had found them, and the quiet ranch on Alaris 9 was about to become a battlefield. The visitors at midnight. The night air was thick and heavy, the smell of wet dust clinging to everything. Eli crouched near the window of the barn, the old rifle resting in his calloused hands. The 3 glowing lights in the sky moved closer, cutting through the mist like silent predators. He could feel the low hum of their engines through the ground, deep and cold. They weren't big ships, more like patrol crafts built for scanning and hunting. Inside the barn, Kalara stirred, sensing the tension even before she opened her eyes. Her gaze met Eli's, and in that instant no words were needed. She already knew who had come. "The Dominion," she whispered. her voice trembling slightly. "They're here." Eli nodded, eyes fixed on the window. "How many, you think?" "3 scouts," she replied, her translator buzzing faintly. "If they find us, the fleet will follow." Eli's grip tightened on the rifle. "Then we make sure they don't." Kaylara shook her head quickly. "You can't fight them, they'll destroy everything." Eli gave a faint smile, rough and tired. "Lady, this land's been my whole life. I ain't letting anyone burn it down." He moved toward the back door, pulling on his coat, the one lined with dust armor from his mining days. Kaylara stood, placing a trembling hand on his arm. "Why help us?" she asked quietly. "We're not even your kind." Eli looked at her, the lines on his face deepened by the lantern light. "Don't matter what kind you are," he said. "You were out there with kids in your arms." That's all I needed to know. Outside, the night crackled with faint energy, the sound of scanners sweeping across the plains. Eli crouched low behind a tractor. Peering over the metal frame, the ships hovered close now, beams of blue light tracing across the sand. He could see the insignia on their sides, a jagged circle with a burning star inside, the mark of the Dominion hunters. He glanced back toward the barn, his heart beating like a drum inside. Kaylara gathered her children, pressing them close, whispering soft words in her language. The smallest one began to cry, and she covered his mouth gently, rocking him until he quieted. The mother's eyes glowed faintly, her emotions flashing like colors under her skin. Fear, guilt, love, and something deeper, something human. Eli adjusted his rifle, aiming at the nearest craft. He knew he couldn't bring down a ship with one shot, but maybe he could make them think twice. The old plasma rifle hummed softly as it charged. He exhaled slow, steady, just like he did when hunting desert stags. Then he pulled the trigger. A streak of blue fire shot into the night, striking the underbelly of the first ship. The explosion wasn't large, but it was enough. The ship spun wildly, alarms blaring. The other 2 crafts instantly veered off, lights flashing, searching for the source. Eli ducked behind the tractor as beams of plasma scorched the sand around him. The smell of burning dust filled the air. He rolled under the machine, moving silently through the shadows. One of the ships descended lower, its engines roaring like a storm. Eli reached the old generator beside his barn and flipped 2 switches. The machine sputtered to life, sparking violently before releasing a cloud of electromagnetic smoke. The Dominion sensors blinked and flickered. Losing lock, Kaylara watched from the window, her eyes wide with disbelief. He wasn't a soldier, but he fought like one. The ship circled in confusion, then slowly began to retreat. Eli stayed crouched, rifle still ready, until the lights disappeared into the clouds. Only then did he lower the weapon, breathing heavily. The silence that followed felt heavier than the battle. When he stepped back inside, Kaylara stood waiting, her eyes glistening like polished glass. "You fought the Dominion," she said softly. "No one does that and lives." Eli gave a tired half-smile, wiping dust from his face. "Guess no one told me that part." Kaylara stepped closer, her voice trembling. "You don't understand what you've done. They'll come back. In greater numbers." Eli poured himself a glass of water, took a slow sip, then replied, "Then I'll be ready." She looked at him for a long moment as if seeing him differently now. The humble rancher was not just a man of the soil anymore, he was something else. A spark the Dominion hadn't planned for. Kaylara lowered her gaze, whispering, "You remind me of someone." "From before the fall?" Eli raised an eyebrow. "Before the what?" But she didn't answer, her eyes distant, lost in memories too heavy for words that night. As the children slept, and the stars flickered faintly above the ranch, Kaylara stared out the window, clutching the small metal pendant around her neck. It glowed faintly, the same color as her wrist mark. In the quiet hum of the night, she whispered a single phrase in her language. The translator couldn't catch the words, but Eli heard the emotion, and though he didn't understand the meaning, he felt it deep in his bones. Something big had begun. The rancher who only wanted peace had just stepped into the heart of a galactic storm. The name she hid, morning came soft and pale, sunlight spilling across the red plains like a gentle tide. The storm had passed, but the world felt changed. Heavy with the kind of silence that hides danger, Eli stood on the porch of his small farmhouse, watching the horizon through the rising heat haze. He hadn't slept, not really, his mind circling the same questions over and over. Who was Kaylara? And what kind of trouble had he just invited onto his land? Inside, the smell of warm bread and steam filled the air. Kalara stood by the stove, awkwardly holding a ladle like it was a foreign weapon. Her silver hands trembled slightly, unused to such simple work. When she saw Eli, she offered a small, hesitant smile. "Your food?" "I tried." Eli raised an eyebrow, taking the plate she offered. "You cooked?" Her expression grew proud for a moment, then puzzled. "It is what humans do, yes?" He couldn't help but chuckle. "Yeah, usually after they sleep." Kalara tilted her head. "I do not need much rest anymore." Something in her tone made him pause, but before he could ask, the eldest child entered, clutching a small metal cube. "Mother," the child whispered. It woke again. Kalara froze, her entire body stiffening as if the words carried weight. She rushed forward, taking the cube and hiding it under her cloak. Eli frowned. "That thing dangerous?" She looked torn, glancing from the children to Eli. "It's part of me," she said slowly, "and part of why they're hunting us." Eli leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Start talking, Kalara." Her lips pressed together before she finally nodded. "You deserve to know." She placed the cube on the table, and as soon as her hand touched it, blue light bloomed across its surface. Images flickered in the air. Tall alien cities of glass and gold, massive fleets crossing the stars, banners of the Dominion fluttering like fire. Then the image changed to Kalara herself, wearing armor marked with the Dominion seal, standing beside a council of alien lords. Eli's breath caught. "You were one of them," he said. His voice low, Kalara nodded slowly. "High Chancellor Kalara Venara, ruler of the 5th Sector." The title hung in the air like thunder. Eli took a step back, struggling to piece it together. "You mean to tell me I got a galactic leader hiding in my barn?" Kalara's eyes filled with quiet pain. "I was, until I spoke against them." Her voice trembled. "The Dominion was built on blood and silence. I tried to change it to stop the purges, but they called it treason." She looked away, her hands trembling. "They erased my name, destroyed my world, and hunted everyone who stood by me." Eli sat down slowly, trying to absorb the weight of her words. For the first time, the quiet ranch felt smaller. Like the universe itself had leaned in to listen. Kalara continued. "The cube holds proof, records of their crimes, communications, orders signed by their high command." Her eyes met his, fierce now. "If it ever reached the Galactic Council, the Dominion would fall." Eli let out a slow breath. "And that's why they won't stop." Kalara nodded. "They would burn 1,000 worlds to keep this hidden." Her children clung to her robe, their eyes wide and frightened. Eli looked at them, then at her, and something inside him shifted. He'd seen pain before on the faces of colonists, miners and soldiers, but this was different. This was the kind of pain that could change a man's soul. He stood, setting his jaw. "All right then, High Chancellor," he said. "Looks like we got ourselves a war." Kalara blinked. "You would help me?" Eli met her gaze, steady and calm. "You're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility." A single tear slipped down her silver cheek, reflecting the light like glass. "No one ever said that to me before," she whispered. Eli gave a faint smile. First time for everything outside. The wind began to rise again, carrying the faint echo of engines in the far distance. Kalara looked toward the sky, her expression tightening. "They found us again," she said quietly. Eli grabbed his coat, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Then let's make 'em wish they hadn't." As they stepped outside together, side by side, the red plains stretched endlessly before them. Somewhere out there, the Dominion's hunters were coming. But for the first time, Kalara didn't feel alone. And Eli Ward, the humble rancher who wanted peace, was no longer just a man. He was humanity's defiance wrapped in dust and stubbornness. And soon, the stars themselves would know his name. The stand at Alaris Ranch. The horizon glowed with fire before dawn. A thin red line slicing through the mist. Eli stood on the ridge above his ranch, his coat flapping in the cold wind below him. Kalara and her children hid inside the old storm shelter, its metal doors sealed tight. He adjusted his rifle strap, eyes locked on the distant sky. The Dominion ships were coming, their engines growling like thunder from the heavens. He could see them now, 3 black silhouettes against the rising light, sleek, angular, and cruel, the kind of ships built not for travel, but for intimidation. Eli spat into the dirt, muttering, "Guess they ain't here to talk." He turned toward the small defense drone he'd dug out of his storage shed. It was old, rusted, missing a leg, but it still hummed with stubborn life. "All right, Betsy," he said to it with a half-smile. "One more job." Inside the shelter, Kaylara knelt beside her children. She could feel the vibrations of the ships through the ground. Her hands glowed faintly as she activated a small crystal embedded in her palm. A translucent shield shimmered for a moment around the room. Not much, just enough to protect the kids if things went wrong. Her eldest child, Liren, looked up. "Mother, will he win?" Kaylara swallowed hard. "He fights like someone who has nothing left to lose." Outside, the first ship landed, its thrusters blasting the sand into a storm. The ramp lowered, and armored figures stepped out, Dominion hunters, their armor black with crimson stripes. Eli counted at least 10, each one armed with plasma rifles. They moved with machine-like precision. Scanning the area, one of them raised a device and barked. "Target signal located below the structure." Another responded. "Bring the human alive if possible." Eli smirked, whispering, "Sorry, boys. No promises." He ducked behind the tractor again and flipped the generator switch. Blue arcs of electricity shot into the air as his old EMP field activated. The nearest hunter's visor flickered, systems glitching. Eli used the moment. One sharp shot from his rifle and the hunter dropped. The others reacted instantly, returning fire. Plasma bolts tearing through fences and walls. Wood exploded, sparks flew, and the air filled with heat. Eli moved like someone born to chaos. He knew every inch of his land, every rock, every hiding place. He slid down behind a water tank, reloading fast. Another burst of plasma hit the tank, spraying steam. He fired again, hitting 2 more hunters before rolling for cover. "Guess city boys don't like real dirt," he muttered with a grin. In the shelter, Kaylara's hand shook. She wanted to run out there, but the memory of her children's cries held her still. She whispered something ancient, a prayer from her world long destroyed. Then she made her choice. The mark on her wrist glowed brighter, and the small cube she had hidden earlier began to pulse. The cube rose slowly into the air. Spinning, Kaylara whispered, "Wake." The cube responded, unfolding into a shape of light, a holographic construct shaped like armor. Outside, Eli ducked behind his barn. Heart pounding, he had dropped 6 of them, but the last 4 were regrouping. He was down to 2 power cells in his rifle. Just as one of the hunters aimed at him, the ground trembled. A blinding flash erupted from the storm shelter, pure white light cutting through the dust. From it emerged Kaylara, clad in ancient armor that glowed like molten silver. Her eyes burned bright violet. Her presence radiating power, the Dominion soldiers froze. Their scanners going wild, one shouted, "Chancellor Vaynara, she's alive." Eli blinked, lowering his rifle. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. Kaylara raised her hand, and a pulse of energy rippled outward. The nearest soldier's weapon melted like wax. The next was thrown backward into the sand. The remaining ones tried to retreat, calling their ship for extraction. But Eli wasn't about to let them go. He climbed onto his truck, aimed at the ship's thrusters, and fired his last cell. The shot hit dead on. The engine burst into blue fire. The ship tilted, crashed sideways, and exploded into a pillar of flame. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of burning metal. Eli jumped down, brushing dust off his coat. "You okay?" he called. Kaylara turned to him, her armor fading into flickering light. "I am," she said softly. "Because of you." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, something human. Eli gave a slow nod. "Well, that's one problem solved." Kaylara shook her head. "No, Eli, that was only a scout unit." He frowned. "You mean there's more coming?" She looked toward the horizon, where the faint glimmer of other ships appeared far away. Her voice was calm but certain. "The Dominion will send an army next." Eli took a long breath, gazing at the horizon with her. Then he smiled, that same quiet, fearless smile. "Then we better start building something they ain't ready for." The wind rose again, carrying the smell of burnt metal and rain. In that moment, 2 souls, one human, one alien, stood side by side on the edge of a storm, and somewhere high above among the watching stars, fate began to turn in their favor, the call across the stars. The fires from the fallen Dominion ship burned long into the night, painting the desert sky with orange light. Eli and Kaylara stood in silence beside the wreck, the air thick with heat and smoke. The battle was won, but not the war above them. Faint lights blinked among the stars, and Kaylara knew those weren't stars at all. They were eyes, watching, waiting, calculating when to strike next. Eli wiped sweat and soot from his face, his voice steady but heavy. So what's our next move? Kaylara turned toward the wreck, her eyes reflecting the blue flames. There's one thing we can do, she said. We call for help. Eli chuckled dryly. Lady, we're 10 systems away from anyone who gives a damn. But she shook her head. Not your people, she said softly. Mine. Her fingers glowed faintly as she reached into the ship's wreckage. Pulling out a cracked communication core, it flickered weakly, a dying machine gasping for energy. Eli crouched beside her. That thing even work? Not yet, she murmured, but it will. Her armor shimmered again, threads of silver light weaving from her hands into the device. Eli watched quietly, half in awe, half in confusion as the air filled with sparks. Slowly, the old comm core came alive, its broken circuits repairing under her touch. The machine projected a holographic map of the nearby systems. Dotted with pulsing signals, Eli pointed at one. That one close? Kaylara shook her head. Too dangerous. Her hand hovered over another, an empty sector marked only by an old human signal beacon. She frowned. This shouldn't exist. It's from your kind. Eli leaned closer, squinting. That's the old Terran emblem. Kaylara looked at him sharply. You recognize it? Yeah, he said quietly. It's from the old wars, before the colonies broke apart. For a moment, they both stared at the fading light of that beacon. Then Kaylara whispered, if it still transmits, someone might answer. They carried the comm core back to the ranch, setting it up in Eli's workshop. Wires stretched across the floor, connected to half-broken power cells and old human tech. The air buzzed with energy as Kaylara worked, her hands moving fast and sure. Eli handed her tools silently, knowing not to ask too many questions. Finally, she nodded. It's ready. She touched the surface of the machine, and a soft pulse spread across the room. A low hum filled the air, followed by static, then a voice, faint and mechanical. This is Earth Outpost Echo 7. Identify your transmission. Eli's heart froze. Did that thing just say Earth? He whispered. Kaylara looked just as stunned. They survived? Eli grabbed the mic, his voice rough. This is Eli Ward, human rancher on Alaris 9. We got survivors here, Dominions on the way. For a moment, only static answered. Then the voice returned, clearer, firmer. Copy that, Alaris 9, hold position. Reinforcement signal confirmed. Stand by. Kaylara blinked, her voice trembling. They heard you. Eli leaned back, letting out a shaky laugh. Well, I'll be damned. Someone's actually listening. Kaylara smiled faintly. You just called across the stars, Eli grinned. Yeah. Guess we woke up the neighborhood. But even as relief touched the air, Kaylara's eyes clouded with worry. The Dominion will detect the signal too, she said softly. We may have started a war we can't finish. Eli looked at her, his voice calm. Then we make sure it's one worth fighting. Outside, the night was unnaturally still, but far beyond Alaris 9's sky, something ancient stirred. In the deep black between stars, an old Terran fleet, forgotten, hidden, silent for decades, received the call. Engines that hadn't burned in years began to glow again. Metal titans turned their bows toward the outer colonies, and a voice over the fleet intercom spoke the words that would shake the galaxy. Signal confirmed, coordinates locked, Earth fleet is returning. Back on Alaris 9, Kaylara stood beside Eli, watching the stars for the first time. Hope shimmered there, bright and fierce. She looked at him and said quietly, You humans, you never really vanish, do you? Eli smiled faintly. Nah, he said. We just wait for the right reason to come back. The wind swept across the plains, carrying the faint hum of engines awakening light years away. And above them, the stars no longer seemed silent. They were listening, because humanity had just answered the call. When Earth returned, the night sky over Alaris 9 trembled with light. Kaylara and Eli stood side by side on the ridge, watching the stars ripple like waves in a dark sea. For a long moment, nothing happened. Only the wind and the sound of crickets from the wet grass after the storm. Then the first line of fire cut through the heavens. Bright and straight, it wasn't lightning, it was re-entry. Eli's breath caught. They came, he whispered. Kaylara's eyes glowed faint violet, the reflection of the burning sky shining in them. Dozens of vessels appeared one after another, sleek and vast, forged in iron and silence. The Dominion had cruisers, sharp and elegant. But these ships were different. They looked old, built for endurance, black as obsidian and heavy with scars. Each one carried the mark Eli had seen on the beacon, Earth's emblem, a blue sphere wrapped in silver wings. Across the desert, the Dominion fleet descended. Their hunters regrouped, hundreds strong. Kaylara felt the air grow tight with tension, the ground humming under the weight of two armadas preparing to clash. She turned to Eli, her voice low. If they fall, the Dominion will erase this world. Eli adjusted the strap of his rifle. Then we make sure they don't fall. The first Terran transmission echoed across the sky. A voice deep and calm. This is Earth Fleet Command. Responding to distress beacon Alaris 9. All Dominion forces are to stand down immediately, the Dominion captain answered. His voice cold. Earth Fleet, your kind was erased from galactic records a century ago. Silence followed. Then a short, steady reply that carried through every frequency. Records can lie, men can't. Then the stars erupted. Missiles streaked like comets, plasma beams carved through the air. The sky itself seemed to burn. Eli and Kaylara shielded their faces as the ground shook. Above them, Earth's dreadnoughts moved like predators. Slow, deliberate, unrelenting. Each time a Dominion ship fired, a Terran railgun answered, its thunder echoing across the plains. Kaylara's children peeked from the shelter, their faces glowing in the flashes of the war above. The eldest whispered, "Mother, they fight for us." Kaylara held him close, her voice trembling. "No, child. They fight because one human refused to walk away." In the middle of it all, Eli's comm unit crackled to life. Alaris 9 ranch coordinates confirmed, ground beacon active. "Hold position for evac," he frowned. "Evac? Ain't going nowhere," the voice insisted. "Civilian presence detected, priority extraction." Eli cut the line. "Tell 'em we ain't civilians no more." Kaylara smiled faintly through the fear. "You are impossible, Eli Ward." He grinned back. "So I've been told." Minutes passed like hours until the last Dominion cruiser broke apart in orbit. The light faded, leaving the sky scattered with debris that glimmered like new stars. A deep silence followed, heavy and unreal. Then a Terran landing craft descended slowly, touching down near the ranch. Its hull bore the name TSS Resolute. The hatch opened, and a group of armored humans stepped out, their visors reflecting the twin suns. Their leader removed his helmet, an older man with gray eyes and a voice like gravel. "Eli Ward?" he asked. Eli nodded. "That'd be me." The commander looked at Kaylara and her children, then back at Eli. "You sent a signal that woke Earth itself," he said. "You have any idea what that means?" Eli shrugged. "Means it was time someone did." Kaylara stepped forward, holding the small cube in both hands. "This holds the Dominion's crimes," she said softly. "It must reach the Galactic Council." The commander accepted it with a bow of respect. "You have Earth's word," he said. "No empire hides forever." As the dawn broke, golden light poured over the ranch. Eli looked up at the Terran ships resting like silent mountains in the sky. He felt something deep inside, a quiet pride, the kind that came from knowing his world still mattered. Kaylara touched his arm gently. "You saved more than my children." "Eli, you saved hope." He smiled, tipping his hat. "Guess that's what humans do best, high above them." The Earth fleet formed up, engines burning blue against the morning. A new signal went out from Alaris 9, carried on every frequency across the galaxy. It said only one thing, simple and clear. Humanity stands, and for the first time in 100 years the stars answered back.